Hello, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm, and today we're going to be continuing our special series on the TV series, The Wheel of Time. We're going to be talking about episode 4. This is a spoiler version of the review, and I am joined once again by Stubble McShave, who is here with me. How are you today, Stubble?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Well, I have to say, Stubble, we talked about episodes 1 through 3, and there was a lot going on in those episodes. But when I saw episode 4, I have to say, I feel like this episode blew all of the other episodes away. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, this was the first one that I really felt like I was in the world. The others were more laying the groundwork, and I felt, and it was a lot of exposition in this, but done in a very nice way. And I liked the episode a lot.
Yeah, it was just so it had such a different feel from that first 3 episode arc. And I'm really glad that they gave us that episode arc to kind of, look at and hash over and try and get an understanding of what may be coming in the future for the series. Because, we needed to have that background. And I think the general audience needed to have that background, even though it didn't include everything that we had hoped it would include. There were still a lot of things that you and I liked about those first 3 episodes, and so many other things that we were hoping to see. And I think we got so much in episode 4 that it's almost impossible not to be excited for the next few episodes. You know in episode 3, the last scene we had was when Logain was captured, and the party of 3, I think it was the party of 3, Moraine, Tam, and Nynaeve
Yeah,
encountered the
it was Lan, not Tam. But
sorry, Lan. um and I have it in front of me, but I pronounced it incorrectly, so I apologize. And Nynaeve encounter the group of Aes Sedai sisters who are holding Logain sort of prisoner. I guess that's the only way to other way to describe it. And
yeah,
we have this incredibly intense look from Logain as we're left with that episode. And I think it's very interesting how they chose to start off episode 4 in a bit of a flashback, which I thought was absolutely perfect, showing how Logain managed to gain followers
yeah.
in a very strategic way that anyone else would have done to gain a follower. What did you think about that opening scene in episode 4?
Yeah, it was a great scene to establish how he rose to power and how he got the king to come on to his side, and uh, he proclaimed himself earlier, and then it started a war because he, people are not that enthusiastic about male channels because they go mad and destroy things, and so yeah, it was a good way to start off to get an introduction to the character. Uh, you can see that he's a channel. See that he hears voices we don't really know.
Oh, think I might have lost you, Stubble. Oh, okay, you were connected. Okay, so let's just redo that.
Your sound is a little broke. It was say something again.
Yes, can you hear me, Stubble?
No, it's okay. No, I don't
Okay,
know what the problem was. It was
yes,
my end or
it's
your end.
probably on my it's probably on my end, honestly. But what I was going to say, Stubble, is can you just go ahead and start again from when you were talking about how this particular opening scene for episode 4 established the history of how Logain rose to power.
Okay, I should start from the start from my point of view.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yes, it was a very good way to establish the character, and we can see that he can use the power, and uh, we also see how he gets the king to come onto his side because he um, people are not that enthusiastic about male channels because they go mad and destroy stuff and destroy villages and kill people when they go mad eventually. And yeah, so and then we see that he is already. We assume at least that he is mad because he hears voices, and we see the like phantom images of these voices he hears that are formed with the black oily substance of sardine covered in the taint in the corruption. So, but it's a good way to establish the character, I think.
Yeah, and we even see during that encounter between the king and Logain, we even see, of course, and I guess this is one of the things that loved or uh, am incredibly excited to even talk about in episode 4 is how often we do see the one power used, regardless of who, let's say, may be wielding it. But in part of this opening scene, we even see uh, Logain heal the king,
Yeah,
and I found that very satisfying. I mean, I really liked that he had this approach of, you know, it implies that there will be benefits to supporting Logain,
yeah,
and the idea of maybe we could even just have a situation where it can be at sort of a different age. He makes a point of saying, or implying, Logain makes a point of saying that he wants to heal that disruption that was created by the other one power user, male one power user, who broke everything. And I really like that idea too. And it's very enticing thought, Stubble.
yeah.
The
And
idea of go ahead.
yes, and we see that he's a very charismatic person, and he's a very good person. Actually, he's at least it seems as that he is. It's just that his it doesn't he can't it doesn't work. He can't do it because he's not. We assume the dragon. So, um, but he's not a bad guy. He's not a villain type of guy. He's maybe misguided character, perhaps.
I think you make a good point with this misguided part, because can you imagine having to function day in and day out with this power and having these voices that are telling you or trying to influence your decisions? I think that would be terrifying to any normal person, let alone having that power and being able to wield it. And something that scares me a little bit about it too is the idea that those voices, or the influence that's trying to sway him to make a decision different from what he would just naturally make, is how determined they are for him to sort of do carnal acts. When I say carnal acts, I mean encouraging him to be done with it, and go ahead and just eliminate anything that's in your path, rather than negotiate or work with the person in front of you. And that type of influence I find very disturbing, because it implies that whatever is influencing him or talking to him is guiding him in the wrong direction. At least I feel that that might be in the wrong direction, and it's startling in a sense. So I think it would be very hard to ignore messages like that that are so strong,
Yeah,
Stubble. And clearly, Logain must be a very strong person mentally to have survived this long with so much working against him, just even in his own mind or in his own powers. So it's almost like he has to fight. Although they didn't present it as an internal conflict necessarily, or something that was controlling him. It certainly is something that puts the voice of doubt in your
yeah,
mind at a very critical point. That it could have gone either way. I mean, I didn't know what to expect. Of course, in the books, we know what happens, but let's just say in the television series, we couldn't tell for certain what the decision making would have been. So, so I thought that this was, pretty much a perfect scene where we saw that, and he heals him, which I liked seeing very much. I always love those healing scenes.
yeah. And you almost got that, the angel on one side and the devil on the other side. But there were two devils. They were both trying to persuade him to kill the king, but he resisted their influence and healed him and joined him instead, or had him join him, had the king join Logain, so to speak.
Well,
So
honestly, I think that the king had no choice. I mean, what do you think, Stubble, at that point when Logain presented that sort of a compromise, that sort of an offer?
there's always a choice, but the other choice would probably mean that he died. So,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
and if we just jump towards the end, you see that he's a follower. He's a true believer at the end.
He
So
really is, yes, and
yeah,
and and I think that although you and I did not see it, let's say it was not shown in the episode, I think that, through the course of how much ever time Logain finds himself with the King of Geldin, um, there are many circumstances like this where Logain continues to prove his worth and prove that he has these specific intentions towards the king. And so the king, it probably has reinforced his sense of loyalty to Logain even more. I would like to think that, during the course of the war or battles or whatever it is, um, Logain keeps continuing to gain his influence. And we even see in some particular cases where uh, we know that even though the king has now become a supporter of Logain, it didn't stop him initially from calling the Aes Sedai, did it?
no, he called the Aes Sedai before, so we know that they are arriving soon after uh, the scene we see, so to speak. And something that I appreciated in the scene, it was there was some shots that was almost the iconography, of a Jesus image of him walking through the mist and the smoke, and you got that it was almost a holy person walking. And if you know what I mean,
I
it
absolutely agree with you on
yeah,
that, and the imagery was just, so perfectly done, uh, and I think that in this world that many of these, people live in, including the king himself, to see this person promise, or proclaim that they're going to follow a different path than what many of the other, one power users have done is something that they want. They want that.
yeah,
They don't, I think that what something that Logain also is doing is that he's kind of making or putting this one power at, it seems like it's at arm's reach for the king and perhaps for his followers. And it's not that I'm saying that it isn't the case for the wisdoms or for the Aes Sedai, but it does feel as if the Aes Sedai and the wisdoms have kind of separated themselves a little bit from the average person. For example, when they decide that once you become an Aes Sedai, you're going to follow these rules, or a wisdom doesn't normally marry. And that kind of separation takes you away from normal life.
Yes.
But what Logain seems to be promising them seems to be something that's much more in reach, and perhaps a life that is much more intertwined with the use of the one power. And I think that that's also something that's very attractive to his
Yeah.
followers. So I felt all of that, Stubble, just
Yeah.
from that part and the discussion. They have a very nice discussion about um Logain declaring himself as the Dragon Reborn, and he almost would have to say that, because if Logain doesn't say that he's the Dragon Reborn and wants to heal things, then people would be even more distrustworthy of him. So he almost, in a way, has to say those things. And
Yeah.
so when we see this next scene, where Nynaeve and Moraine are now in the village with the other Aes Sedai. And finally, Stubble, Moraine is being healed, and she must have just been suffering with that wound for maybe, it could have been weeks for all we know, but it was a long time. And we really haven't seen Moraine at her best, because she has been suffering, for the last, has it been 2 episodes where
Uh,
she's
yeah. Towards the end of the second episode, she was not mobile, so to speak.
right. And so Nynaeve did her best to get Moraine back on, the horse, so to speak, just to get to the next step in the journey. But and I remember when I first started to read the books, and you had told me about how the the in the book it's told from certain points of view. But I feel like this particular episode, although she's not in the entire episode, I feel like this particular episode is told from Nynaeve's point of view. What do you think?
Yeah, a lot of it is, but we see even in the Aes Sedai camp, we see scenes where she's not present. So it's many points of view, but certainly she has a lot of it. And her scenes with Lan is, I think they're really good, and I like also when you talk about the Aes Sedai camp, the differences between the green Aya and the red Aya.
Yeah, there definitely are. There's so much in this episode. Of course, after Moraine is healed, and Kareen, who's another Aes Sedai, talks to Moraine and kind of brings her up to speed about how they are controlling Logain, or at least they believe they are controlling him to a point. But towards the end of the episode, I question exactly how much control they actually had over him, and they're trying to stop him from using the one power. And the other thing too is that it's clear that the Aes Sedai believe that he's a false dragon, and they're very skeptical of his abilities. And what is the importance? And I do just want to ask this question, because there's so much to discuss on this episode, Stubble. So we haven't even started to scratch the surface. But I wrote down questions as I made notes that I wanted to ask you and get your opinion about, of course.
Yeah.
Um, uh, what is the importance of the trial at the tower, and what would happen to Logain? Let's say if he went to the tower, was deemed as a false dragon. Would it also result in him being, the gentling, where I guess they strip him of his power, or forever stop him from doing that? What's the importance of the trial at all?
Yeah, he would be gentle there as well, and the trial is that there's a formality that they just can't go around the countryside willy-nilly gentling people. It's a very strict procedure. But we see in the opening to the first episode that some of the Red Aja has already been doing that. The guy that they chased down and gentled in the beginning should have gone to the tower to Tarvalon and have stood trial and then be gentled. So,
Yes,
so
yes.
there's a rogue element to some of the Red Aya sisters.
And it is actually a little satisfying to see this, because they do, I mean, we're talking about individuals who have a lot of power, and if Moraine and her warder have been searching for 20 years for the dragon, you can imagine what some of the other Aes Sedai have been doing for the past 20 years, and the work that they've been doing. And perhaps they feel that they've earned the right, in a sense, to
Yeah,
go ahead and say, this person uh, is causing so much destruction, and that perhaps they can justify the desire or the need to, the opportunity to, if it were to arise, to go ahead and do the gentling, uh, you know, uh, I guess spell. But we actually see the one power used to block the one power.
yeah.
And, I tried to keep track of all the uses of the one power. And of course, I couldn't keep track of anything, but this is perhaps one of my favorite ones. Because I guess I feel like uh let's say, the one power is a gift given to an individual, but if they do something wrong, then you have the ability to maybe the intention is that you have the ability to curb the person from doing harm.
Yeah.
That's the intention.
And the channeling, it's a little bit different from the books. They have modified some things to work better in a visual medium like a TV series. So there are some differences, but the general things are the same. It's the same concept, so to speak, more or less.
And so we find, all these wonderful sisters and their wonderful warders, like they have a great relationship. This whole thing, and I like how Nynaeve is on the outside looking in. And I know we haven't gotten to this point of the in the episode yet about this relationship between the warders and the Aes Sedai, and it's okay because we're going to discuss more about this. Like I was just so excited from this episode. But despite the Aes Sedai's strength, they are exhausted because they are around the clock 24/7 blocking Logain from using the one power. And when Moraine is healed, she offers to help out. And I was curious about what you think Moraine feels when she blocks the one power in Logain.
Well, they describe it through words in the show, but it's very. I mean, he looks for outs all the time. Looks for weaknesses in their shield on him, and so it's very taxing on their energy, on their stamina, and they describe it as holding a cat in the bath or something like that, and
Right.
that gives a good mental image of its dexterous task to keep the shield on. It's not just strength, although that's important, but there's also a skill involved, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that they looked at that a little bit, and it isn't sort of just like I cast any spell I want, and it doesn't mean, that I can't keep casting spells or limitless power. There
Yeah.
are, they do have certain powers, and once they expel the powers, it is exhausting for them. And we also see that despite Lilandrin, who wants to kind of take care of Logain right away with this gentling spell, we notice that Kareen and some of the other Aes Sedai are determined to bring Logain to the tower. And as you said, they all have, I guess maybe they choose a different area of practice that they want to go to. But this particular episode is great because we're not the tower, but yet we're seeing so many different kinds of Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
So that's something that's, yes, go ahead.
And Karine, eller Karine, eller how they pronounce it, I don't remember in the show now. She's not in the books in the main series. She's from the prequels, from the prequel book. She I suspect that she is one of the sitters. If you know, you've seen in the trailer, you've seen the big scene in the White Tower where the three sisters from each Aja that sits in chairs, and that's called the Hall of the Tower. And I think Kerene is one of the green sitters the Green Sisters that are sitters. They like almost the Senate in the U.S. or something like that. But so, but in the prequel book, she is a strong sister who gets selected for a specific task, but she dies under mysterious circumstances. So they lifted her character into this show, and she seems to be the most respected of them all, and probably the one who's in charge of this whole thing. She seems like the leader, at least to me. And there's, like I mentioned, the difference between the red Arya and the green Arya. That's very noticeable when it comes to the warders, because the red Arya, they reject having any warders. In general, they are kind of anti-men, while the green are very pro-men. They
Oh,
like, and the green are the ones that but sorry, just
yeah, of course.
uh, you can speak a bit.
Yes, and you were saying how the different Ajas, of course, they choose and then they wear a specific robe that would put them in a particular category. And we are definitely going to talk more about that because there's a scene where Nynaeve kind of starts to understand. She doesn't even barely scratch the surface of this whole thing, but she
Yeah,
starts to understand it, and it's almost as if Nynaeve is being drawn to all this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along in the episode, which has been fantastic. So we have another scene with Perrin and Egwene. We do revisit the main characters here. They are still separated, and they are still with the travelers,
yes,
and they are finding themselves as they're talking amongst each other, and they're questioning, uh, you know, these travelers. Of course they are. They don't know anything about them, and so they just are not fully convinced of who these travelers really are. And they even ask one of the travelers, how come you are so willing to let us in? I mean, we could be anybody. And the travelers are like, well, we saw you and you guys are kind of in rags and you look kind of hungry and tired, and you certainly couldn't be any kind of sly, con
yeah,
man or steal. And I thought it was funny that character made a suggestion that they might be con men, rather than
yeah,
just say maybe you guys are down on your luck and you got separated from your party and you were traveling with a woman from a fallen house, which was true. That would have been
yeah,
true.
yeah,
I think it's funny that the travelers chose to compare them to someone who might try and uh, be a person who would trick them
yeah,
versus just an ordinary person. And I think the travelers, by him saying that, he is saying that they are also kind of leery of the two of them, although they didn't say, we don't trust you entirely either. But I think what is very interesting is that somehow while Egwene and Perrin are staying with the travelers are now being portrayed as being somewhat more deep and existential in their thinking. And you had touched on that before about how they believe that, this is fate, and they're not particularly interested in as to whether or not you're in trouble and you've come to hang out with them, because they'll just take life as it comes.
yes,
And for some reason, there was a question about the use of weapons and the effect that it has over an individual's life. And of course, Perrin is still walking around with this wound from the Trolloc. I believe it was he got the wound, in one of the first episodes, and the wound was from a Trolloc and it's hurting him. And I'm wondering, how is this wound still affecting him at this point, while he's still with the travelers?
uh, it seemed that there was a group of wolves, and one came forward to him and licked his wound. So maybe that helped the healing a bit, because it seems that he's not that affected by it at when they're traveling with these people. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they will address that in the next episode or something. If his
And
wound is healing or if it's worse.
And I recall, we didn't see the wound. This is one of the I don't believe we saw it in this episode. This is maybe one of the few episodes where we haven't seen it. And I think the reason why we haven't been shown the wound right now is not only because maybe it might be not the most important thing at this point, or that they're saving it for later, but you can't really hide anything from the travelers when you're in their company. There's always somebody watching. So that's another very important thing about that type of a community. Um, you don't have any privacy. So you can't sort of like just pop off and do whatever you like and come back without them knowing about it. So,
Yes.
if you think that you have a private kind of existence in that type of a community, you just don't. Everybody knows where you're going and what you're doing. And so perhaps they could sense that something was bothering Perrin, and that's why they brought up or started to talk in that realm of questioning or something like that. Perhaps they could tell that Perrin and Egwene did have a rough time. Maybe they did have some sort of physical confrontation with someone, and that knocked them out of where they were going. But I think that the travelers do have a sense of when they pick up people to join their community, what they may be suffering from. And I think that we also got a sense of that when one of the travelers asked Egwene, who does your heart belong to? Who's this man who your heart belongs to? Because I know that character, Amren, he's kind of a very attractive man. And he figures if a woman's not attracted to me, then she must be in love with another man, because every woman must be attracted to me. And so they have a different way of looking at things. So he
Yeah.
knew that there had to be some other incredible man. This man must be really great if she's not attracted to the handsome guy that I am, and he is very attractive. Of course, as any woman would be attracted to this man, and so I think that their way of looking at things is very different. And we'll get a little bit more to that. We have this scene now, finally, of Rand and Mat, and we see that despite everything, despite having sort of like run out of that town with their tail between their legs, and the Gleeman defending them, they're still very, very suspicious of the Gleeman.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about how suspicious they are of this man who pretty much has put his neck on the line? And they, like Rand is like, well, maybe he's working with them. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know about that. This lady got stabbed in the neck by him. I don't believe that he would be working with them if that was the case. What do you think about that?
I think they're very suspicious of everyone because he didn't see it coming that she was a dark friend, someone who serves the dark, and I think he was really taken aback by that. And I think he Rand, that is. I don't think he trusts as easily right now in the TV series. And Matt, he's affected in another way. He's a little he we see that in this episode that he is deeply affected by that dagger he took from the city, but I guess we'll get into that later on. But no, I think they're suspicious of everyone right now, and that includes the Gleeman, even if he's seemed trustworthy so far.
And we're talking about how people, in the story, they're suspicious. We even see that, and you had touched on the colors of the Aja for the Sedai. Clearly, you'd mentioned Alana had the green one. We saw a yellow Sedai burned at the stake in another episode.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what the different colors do? What their
I haven't
specialities are?
I haven't memorized them. But I do know that one of the Sedais was talking about how when she it might have been the green Sedai. I could be wrong. She said that when she joined, she had heard the stories of how they had fought in battle and how amazing she thought that was. I hope this is the right one.
Yeah.
And then she says she never thought that in her lifetime that she would be brought forth to do this. And so what I loved about that scene, Stubble, was that we learned that the blue I guess is like you're an investigator or, they said
Uh,
spy, but,
yeah,
I would like to think of it as an investigator. You know, you kind of travel around and, you're trying to figure out information, and they are so when I say they, the other Sedais are desperate to find out what Moraine knows, aren't they?
yeah, because she's the one that's mysterious here. They traveled together for several weeks probably with this prisoner, or they traveled several weeks to get to the prisoner or to Logain and take him prisoner and then get back there. So they have mapped each other out, and Moraine has been away from the tower for a long time. So what is her deal? Where does she fit into this power structure? Because she is one of the most powerful of the Aes Sedai there. So it's important for them to know, is she on my side or on the other side, or does she do her own thing, or what's her deal? And you mentioned the Green Aes Sedai who said that she was of the Battle Aja, the Green Aja, that she couldn't settle with just one warder, and that's the thing that the Greens have. They can have just one, but usually they have two, three, or four warders. And she has two warders, and they had they left the fire there, and I don't know if you noticed that when the warders sat around the fire and talked, and she called on her two warders, and they left, and we got the sense that they were more than just friends. It,
Well, yes, and they certainly did, imply this, and what's great about this scene, Stubble, is that, um, Nynaeve finds herself once again, just like we as the observer of the story, learning so much from this part of the, uh, uh, or from this point of view as, you know, obviously we've read the book and we're not entirely ignorant of the story, but Nynaeve, in being that she is so young and perhaps maybe not as well traveled as, this entire group of mature women, because, you know,
yeah,
most of them seem to be maybe 40 and over. Um, you know, Nynaeve is learning quite a bit, and she kind of stayed on the outskirts of away from the Sedai and from the Warders. She didn't want to necessarily be part of any of it.
no,
And after she's approached by one warder and by Leandrin, not pronouncing her name right. She
no,
finds
it
herself
was pretty
around this
close.
fire.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
no, it was good. It was good.
Yes, she
Yeah,
she found herself around this fire as you suggested, and now she's in there. So it's almost like once she decides to go to the fire, she's now all of a sudden not separate from them anymore because she kind of been a little standoffish towards
yeah,
everyone, hasn't she? And rightfully so. You know, she's seen a lot. You remember she was carried off by those Trollocs with a
yeah,
cord around her neck, dragged, and she fought this off. And I'm getting the sense that Nynaeve is a pretty intense and powerful individual who can fight off a creature like that, Stubble. We saw
yeah,
that in one of the episodes, and I personally would have been terrified, but she had specific instincts, in my opinion, while this was happening. She had very specific instincts of observation. She had very specific instincts of seeing where the weaknesses were, let's say in the Trollocs, and evasive techniques that were very impressive, like a fighter, like a
yeah,
trained fighter. And I thought that that was very interesting that we saw that in her, knowing that she's a wisdom. So getting back to my point, what is my point? Now that she's around the fire and she's learning about this relationship between the warders and the Aes Sedai, and one of the warders said that the relationship between a warder and an Aes Sedai is stronger than that of a man and a woman in marriage, or something like that. And they kept going on and on about how strong this relationship was. And you could clearly see these warders were very happy with this arrangement. But I think that there must have been something more. What I liked about it was that it showed that the warders were enjoying the relationship. And
yeah,
so when I spoke to you about, I wanted to know what the relationship between Moraine and her warder was, because it seemed like they seemed to imply in that first episode that it was more of an intimate relationship because they were in this bath together, and taking a bath with someone, while it is true, like in some countries, the whole families bathe together. I understand that. But this
Yeah.
particular bath seemed a little bit more intimate to me
Yeah.
than, let's just say, we're bathing and it's a ritualistic thing. This is what we do in our society. So it seemed like it was a little bit more, and she was almost waiting for him to join her. So I think that, it was important to show this. And anybody can leave it up to interpretation. She went and collected her warders and they went off, and whatever they do, that's their business. But for all we know, they may be talking about what happened during the day and having dinner,
Yeah.
even stuff like that. I mean, we can't go ahead and assume that we know everything that's going on. But the most important thing is that the warder and the Aes Sedai have this connection. And if you can feel what another person is going through, or understand, be empathetic towards their suffering, then that is your family. That is your family. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at it more as that person being your family. This is it. You've made this bond with this person, and whether it's true that you can feel a wound that happens to the person, or when they're happy or sad or emotional, as we heard Moraine describing to him about how when he drinks she gets emotional, or vice versa.
Yeah.
They are family, and that's very important to see. And it's somewhat of a comforting relationship to have, because I wouldn't want to think of being a person wielding that power and being on my own.
No.
You
And
know, um,
it's a lot of trust in the relationship. It's intimate, but not sexual, at least between Moraine and Lan. And it's 100% trust. But if you have Aes Sedai and Warder who have a sexual relationship, then they also feel what the other person feels in the same way. Like, they can feel each other's injuries, and but they can also feel each other's pleasures and each other's. She could sense that he was a little tipsy, so she got emotional. So, you know, there's a bond between them that's not in a marriage, because if you are married to someone, maybe you can sense something what their mood is, but here you feel what their mood is. You feel. So if you have an intimate relationship with someone in a sexual way and are bonded, then that gets to another level as well.
yeah, I mean, it sounds great to me, Stubble. I mean, we need this in our planet. But what I was going to say is, I do like that they had something that was meaningful like that, and it clearly
Yeah.
does mean a lot. And and I like it better than the wisdoms, where they just are kind of by themselves. And we kind
Yeah.
of see that with Nynaeve. When she was speaking to Egwene about becoming a wisdom and being alone, and Egwene was very, like, she's not fully, she wants to use her powers, but you could see she had an internal conflict of not being with Rand. And I can understand why. Like, she already
Yeah.
had an established relationship. She doesn't want to give that up. And why should she? These are questions that any person would be asking. And I'm glad that that became a question in the beginning of this series, because she's still asking this question. Egwene is still asking herself of this,
Yeah.
like, she
And
doesn't want it. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and she's very ambitious and very. If there's an opportunity, she goes for it. And I think she saw an opportunity to become the wisdom, to become something else than just. Even if being married to Rand had been a very nice thing, she saw something else that maybe was something more in her future if she chose. It's like the modern, or it's not really modern, but the career path or the family path almost.
Yes, and the other part that I think is interesting is, and as I did mention this already, is that both the warders and the Aes Sedai want Nynaeve to kind of join them, and Nynaeve is suspicious. She says, "I know you want information from me, but let me ask questions and maybe I can get information from you. And it's true, like she knows how to handle herself, obviously. But
Yeah.
why do you think both parties, the warders, it's not that they're separate, but let's just say the warders approached her and then the Sedai approached her. Why are they so eager to have Nynaeve join them around the fire? Why?
I think that Nynaeve doesn't trust Aes Sedai and the ones using the One Power, whereas the warders are uh, more on her level, as she thinks, at least. And she comes from a background of, you know, being out in the woods, finding herbs and tracking and everything, and that's not exactly the same thing that the warders do, but there's a kinship to it, in a way that she the Aes Sedai exudes authority, and she doesn't really like anyone else being above. She's the authority figure in the Two
In her
Rivers, and
village.
yeah,
Yes.
and she's very insecure in her place there as the authority figure. So the last thing she wants to do is to put herself in a position where she's, in her mind, subservient to someone else.
And Stubble, another thing that I find very interesting is, and we talked about this, but we're going to talk about just a little bit more, is that when Moraine first spoke or entered that tavern in the Two Rivers area, um, and she didn't go to Nynaeve right away, but then later on in the episode or in an episode following that, Moraine kind of acknowledges Nynaeve as an important wisdom and an important person. Do you think now, after Nynaeve has been around this, spent maybe a week or two around Moraine and some of these other Aes Sedai and even the warders, have her feelings changed about them since that first encounter with Moraine?
Uh, Her feelings towards the Aes Sedai, you mean?
Yes. Yes.
Um, Probably to some degree, but she's very wary about them. She's, you know, like Leandrin didn't give a good impression on her. You know, she called her a viper or a snake or something, and she doesn't trust them as it is. But I think she feels a kinship to the warders because they also serve some. They serve someone else, and she serves her village, or served her village. So I think she feels a kinship more towards, and she doesn't like the politics that's, you know, in the different factions between the different Aes Sedai. She doesn't like all that stupid stuff. She just wants to get to the heart of something, and I think the warders represent that in a different way than the Aes Sedai does.
And is Nynaeve is kind of a victim of her environment, isn't she? While it is true that they know tales of what's happened, um, let's say their peaceful existence has resulted in them not having the experience of the world that the Aes Sedai have, and
Yeah,
the warders. So, I think that this experience is kind of bringing her up to speed, and I do like it because while it's just one episode, let's just say maybe it was a few weeks that she's there and she gets to kind of ease into this and understand that there are different types of relationships that exist between um, one power users and other people in the community, and she's starting to understand that maybe it's something that's needed. And also I think that she could relate in the same that you way that you mentioned, when the warders tell her that the Aes Sedai are what it means to serve, or serve it. I can't remember the exact definition, but what the actual word means. I think
yeah,
that, that's when she says, okay, this warder thing isn't exactly what I thought it was. And clearly you can see it isn't exactly what she thought it was. And to be honest with you, Stubble, um, I I personally did not assume that the warder relationship was a servant one. I thought perhaps, this guy was like a knight, and
yeah,
that was her champion, and it's a very dangerous position. Like, this was he had to be her security, and in a way they are.
yeah.
So I never looked at it as sort of like an errand boy thing. I looked at it as a very dangerous position, where you can get yourself killed. And, just like I'm sure that yellow Aes Sedai had a warder who probably sacrificed himself trying to protect her. So,
Yeah.
there was a lot more to it than just what it looks like initially. And so, and I just this whole thing has been so enjoyable to talk about. So going to I just want to move on to Matt and Rand, who finally find a place to stay in this and they seem to be having what I would call at least I think a stroke of really, really bad luck. Because while it's not apparent to Rand what's happening to Matt, it's so apparent to the
To Tom Marilyn, the
the
Gleeman.
Gleeman.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, to the Gleeman that Matt is showing signs of having or being under the influence of the One Power. Is this correct, Stubble?
That's what he thinks, and it's a good. In the books, it's full of unreliable narrators. They think they know, but they don't really know what's going on. And so Matt is under the influence of the dagger, and we see the representation. He throws up, this black goo stuff, and that's reminiscent of the black stuff in the city from episode 2. Uh,
Yes.
but Tom tells the story of his nephew Owen, who was a little bit strange, and all of a sudden they noticed that he could channel, and he was later gentled by the Red Aja, the Red Sisters, and so he thinks that Matt is a magic user, which would be normal to think because he's been behaving oddly and so on. But we, as the audience, know that no, it's something else. It's something more sinister that's happening to him. So, and we get when it comes to Matt, we get this lovely scene with the little girl where she holds out her doll to him, and they have a little conversation. What did you think about that?
Well, I think that you needed something gentle in the episode because Matt so let's say if we're just looking at it from the point of view of Matt and Rand growing up in the Two Rivers, and they're very young men who have had an idyllic life up until now. And the last village's experience was very jarring to anybody. And it's not a surprise. I think I would be sick. I would be on this trip, but I would be like, my stomach doesn't feel very good. It's a very unsettling feeling
Yeah,
having this situation and pretty much being on the run, which is what they are. They think that they're safe, but as they go from place to place, they keep finding these dangers. And the Gleeman is the only person who seems to be able to kind of handle this. And
yeah,
Rand is very confused by the Gleeman's comfort with all this. The reason why the Gleeman isn't comfortable, he just knows how to respond to each situation, and it's something that Rand and Matt don't know what to do. So
yeah,
since they just aren't able to go ahead and say, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. They don't have those answers, but the Gleeman knows what to do. And that
yeah,
scares them. And it was kind of like how Moraine scared them. She said,
yeah,
this is where we're going. And Rand is like, no, I'm not cool with this. Well, now it's another person who kind of crosses their path, is helping them out quite a bit. And he's also not cool with this. So I think that we needed just a little bit of light and a little bit of hope in this. And also Matt, kind of forgot what it was like to just see an ordinary person. They're not suspicious of this child.
no,
You couldn't be suspicious of this sweet, darling little girl who came out to give him bread as he was vomiting whatever it was, this beautiful loaf. It was like a perfect loaf of bread.
yeah.
And
I
I would
wanted some bread when I saw that.
Yes. There she is giving him the bread, and she told him, I'm not supposed to speak to you, but if you get scared, here's my doll. And this is exactly what a child would do. Are you scared? You want a
Yeah.
hug, or something like that. That's what
Do,
children do.
do you do you
He
do you remember the name of the doll?
No, I don't.
When you watch it the next time, remember the name of the doll. It will come back later on.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have to say that they did zoom in on the doll, after, let's say, the Gleeman speaks to Rand and says, you know, "Something's wrong with your friend,"
Yeah,
and Rand says, "Well, I'm always here for you, Matt. I'm always here for you," and we see, um, things go down from there, but, we'll get to that in a second, and I promise you, when I watch it again, I'll write down the name of the doll, but
that's not that important. I just wondered.
no, I'm gonna write it down. Um, we see another scene where Egwene and Perrin are with the travelers, and this was really interesting. Was the idea of Egwene is absorbing all this information like a sponge,
Yeah,
but Perrin is has this internal conflict, and so he's not really able to, um, uh, you know, assess the situation correctly.
yeah, and he's as a character, he's brooding and he's very, you know, very much in his head and thinking about stuff. And they gave him that conflict with the wife that's not really in the books, but they gave because in the TV series you can't have someone think all the time that you can in a book. In a book he thinks a lot and he's
Right.
very brooding about stuff. But so here he questions. I don't know if you remember, but the last time we spoke, I said that Perrin will be very tempted to stay with these people. And I think that's still true because he doesn't like violence, especially after what happened in the episode 1. So I think he's very tempted to stay with these extreme pacifists who follow the way of the leaf. The leaf lives its appointed time, and then when it falls to the ground, and the whole thing, do not resist, kind of thing, at least not violently. And I think that conversation that they had was very, very interesting, and it gave you felt for the Isla, the older woman who had lost her daughter. And what did you think of that?
Well, I think that the idea of talking about revenge and
Yeah,
the idea of these emotions that you feel, this is the first person who's spoken to maybe a parent at all about experiencing loss, because his fellow travelers, not these travelers, but the other three young adults, believe that he had lost, his wife. And to be honest with you, Stubble, if I had lost somebody like that, I would be devastated. And it's not that I don't think that they're sensitive to his loss. I just feel like they're so busy with what's going on that no one is able to really kind of take him aside and say, "I'm really sorry about what happened. I know this must be killing you right now.
yeah.
You
But
must miss
but
her so much."
no one else knows exactly what happened. They think
True.
they
But
think
even
his
so,
wife
Stubble,
died, but not how. They don't know how she died.
well, it was an accident, right? So, um, even
Yeah,
so,
he doesn't.
he
His
doesn't.
inner monologue is not. It was an accident. His inner
Right.
monologue is, I killed my wife. I killed my wife. I killed my wife with an axe. Oh, I killed my wife. That's his inner monologue.
Yes, and it is still a loss. Let's say, technically
Yeah,
speaking, it's still a loss because this was someone who he cared for deeply. You could see that they loved each other in that first episode, and now that he knows that she's just gone, it's haunting him, and we do see it haunting him, I guess, in a sense, in uh, in a way. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, but um, I think it's very important to note that he hasn't had that comfort, that even a funeral, like
yeah,
he hasn't had what people normally would have when you lose someone like that. And then maybe one day he would say, it was an accident. These things do happen in life. And he just hasn't even had anybody say, "I'm so sorry. And you must
mm,
feel terrible." Like, no one. Um,
yeah,
and it is only because of the circumstances of what's going on in their world, but he must just be so broken inside, and you can tell by looking at his face.
yeah. And speaking of revenge, he has no one to take revenge on. He
Yes.
he was the one, at least in his mind. He was the one. So he's beating himself up all the time.
It's so hard to watch him struggle this way. And Gwen, however, since she doesn't have that inner conflict, she is, you know, kind of intermingling with the travelers, and Aram, who obviously shows some interest in her because she's a beautiful young woman, and she asks them about the song,
Yeah,
and Aram says it's the song that will bring peace, and that it means that they can live in happiness for their days. And I love what she says. She says, "Are you sure you haven't already found it?"
yeah,
And I thought that that was such a very important thing because in this uncertain world, even in our uncertain world, finding that point where you can still be happy and still take joy in things, even if the world around you is falling apart. We had a difficult year last year.
yeah,
Um, Being able to find the joy in these things, I think can kind of bring some kind of peace and happiness to a person. And I thought that that was a very interesting message. She's looking at them saying, well, look at your lives. You've accepted fate and you've accepted what comes, and the repercussions or what comes after that. And, is that not a way you can live in happiness and peace? Is that not
yeah,
an exact definition of how to cope with everything that's coming around? And, I thought that I really liked that dialogue in there. And, and as I mentioned to you before, Aram, approaches Egwene and says, who's this guy?
yeah,
And he is really good looking. The guy who they picked for Aram is very attractive. And so Egwene says that she says, if my love had fallen, I mean, she didn't use these words, but she says, if my love had fallen, I would have known. Now, I have to ask you this question, Stubble. Would Egwene know if Rand fell? And do they have a bond that we don't know about yet?
Well, I can't answer questions like that. Maybe,
Do
maybe
you
yes,
think?
maybe no.
Do you think Egwene would know? And do you think they have a bond we don't know about yet?
Maybe.
No.
As Robert Jordan, when he got these kind of question, he said, "Read and find out."
Yes, I know.
So I
Well,
have
do
to
you
say,
think it's
what,
something we could
watch,
look forward to,
yeah,
possibly?
watch and find out.
Yes. Well, I think it's something that we can look forward to in the future. And what I'm really thinking is, and this may or may not be true. What happens in the television series, and for those of you who've read the book, you already know what is going to happen. But for pure speculation purposes, for me personally, in
Yeah,
how this may go in the television series, wouldn't it be amazing if Egwene became an Aes Sedai and Rand became her warder? Now, this is just pure speculation, but
yeah,
I'm just saying that, that's the type of stuff that I would imagine would be interesting. Of course, that may never happen, but it doesn't matter. The fact that I'm even thinking about, where people are going to end up or where their paths may lead is so exciting to me right now because we can see the potential. And it just, this episode was just had so many amazing things in it that I think that a lot of fans might be looking at that and maybe saying, I wonder if that's going to happen. So, what's what's what also I found very interesting was Rand's dream. He has this dream, and
yeah.
of course everybody's having dreams, but
Before you go into
yes,
the dream, I
yes,
just have a question for you.
yes.
Do you think Egwene and Rand will be friends forever, or do you think they will have a conflict?
I think they're going to have conflict.
Do you think they
And
will be enemies? Do you think they will be allies and friends?
I don't think they're going to be enemies, but um, I think that if I think that if they grow too far apart, that their intimate relationship is not going to be enough to keep them together. So I'm only going to respond on
Friends.
their relationship, which had already seemed to be broken somewhat because she
Yeah,
had already made a decision to become a wisdom, which would have excluded Rand.
yeah.
So she had
It's
already
but
made. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's fun to ask you these questions about what do you think will come in the future, and I won't answer them.
Well, remember, I'm glad it's fun for you to ask me these questions, and I just think that the majority of what held them together was their intimate relationship.
Yeah,
And for Rand and for Egwene, once you remove that from them, they're just ordinary average friends. But I think that they want the intimate relationship. So, like it's kind of like you're involved, boyfriend and girlfriend, let's say, or whatever that is, two men, two women, doesn't matter. You have this intimate relationship and you enjoy the intimate relationship and you look forward to this intimate relationship. Clearly, they have an intimate relationship, physical
yeah,
intimacy as well. But once you say that you're not going to do that anymore, and it's the thing that you look so forward to, and like it's so important in your relationship, are you going to keep your relationship going? This is a question that I think
yeah.
a
Or
lot of people.
what does the relationship evolve to?
Well, this is a good question. I can't speak personally, but I'm wondering for these two young people who are very young to give up on an intimate relationship, right, what does it evolve to? Just think about I I'm not going to talk about my personal life, but let's just say I've seen other people with their past relationships and how once they lose that intimacy, what it means. And
Yeah,
sometimes they drift apart and you know, but she says
yeah,
she would know if something happened to him.
yeah. Do you think she would know,
I do,
or
yes.
is it just something that she says?
I think she knows. I
Yeah,
think she knows a lot more than she's saying, and Gwen is maybe the biggest mystery of all of them. Because
yeah.
she's not really disclosing anything, is she?
No, she's been very quiet about her aspirations and goals, and so except being
And
the wisdom.
do you know why I think she's being quiet? I think that conversation she had with Moraine was a warning about, in addition knowing maybe perhaps having more contact with Moraine than the others, knowing that things are going to be a rocky road. I
Yeah,
think that she has come to the realization that you know, uh her life is not going to be an ordinary life.
no,
So, I
yeah,
think that conversation with Moraine, why Moraine kind of singled her out, and Rand noticed that. He
yeah,
noticed that she was singled out. And Rand, I'm not going to say he's jealous, but I don't think he liked that. One, because it's going to break up the intimacy between the two of them, because Moraine is kind of showing her something that he can't provide to her. But
yeah,
two, he himself was not singled out, let's say, at this point. And
no,
he's like, well, what about the rest of us, as he mentions? And so that's something else to think about in the sense of how Egwene is, let's say, will be going forward, or possibly could have differences between her and Rand, because before that, they were just two kids in the village, right?
yeah,
And it wasn't that long ago, like
no,
literally maybe a month or two, or maybe it's a year. Um, they were two kids in the village enjoying themselves, and now things have changed so dramatically. Rand is wondering what's next.
yeah. Uh, Speaking of what's next, we have a few scenes we haven't gotten to yet.
Yes, and let's talk about those, Stubble.
Yeah,
Um, so, for one, I really loved that Rand's. It was quick, that dream sequence that he had,
yes,
where we see Rand tell Matt, "Remember, I'm always going to be here for you,"
yeah,
and we see the party of four. I really like
yeah,
this, in the dream. And the first thing that we noticed is that we see, or one of the first things we noticed is that we see Perrin slamming a body on a rock with like a giant hammer, and
yeah. And
the body
it
has
looks
a
like
ring.
it's his wife. He's trying
Yes,
to forge his wife back to life or something like that in the dream.
and of course, as I said, you know, it's tearing him up inside. We both agreed on this, and I hope that when Rand sees this, he realizes there's more to that, you know, than meets the eye. Losing somebody that means that much to you. The
Yeah,
second thing that I found very interesting was that we saw Matt, and he had blood on his hands, or what looked like, was it blood? Was
yeah,
it blood?
it looked like blood, and it's many possible interpretations about that. One is that he has blood on his hands, that he's done something horrible, or it may be something else that's maybe off in the future. Who knows? Or maybe both. Who knows?
It was terrifying, and Matt was scared. He was so scared in the scene.
Yeah,
Um, and so I didn't know whether he had done something or whether he was a victim or what this, or both, you know, whatever it was terrifying. And then we saw e- Egwen,
yeah,
and she tells Rand to run, doesn't she?
yeah. And then she's taken, or what? I don't know
Yeah, she's
exactly what happens, but
captured by the shadow. I
yeah,
don't even know what took her, but I think that that tells Rand that possibly Egwene is going to make many more sacrifices for him. Now, he's Rand is not prepared for that,
no,
because Rand's approach is that I guess maybe he feels he protects Egwene. Maybe he feels like he should be by her side and making sure
yeah,
she's safe. But I don't think that he is prepared to accept that she may be making a huge sacrifice for him.
no,
And, you know, by her telling him to run. And I think that him waking up and understanding, and of course, you know, when he wakes up, this isn't anything that he can interpret right now. He needs Moraine he needs to tell Moraine this dream, and Moraine would say, well, this is what it means, or what it could mean, or who was in the dream. And
yeah,
if he told Moraine who was in the dream, Moraine would go, oh my goodness, you know.
yeah,
But you know, he suddenly wakes up, finds the Gleeman, and they run into the villagers' home, and they find Matt in the villagers' home,
yeah.
and the villagers, well, you know, this person
The,
who's
the
hosting this,
family in the house.
right,
Yeah,
are dead on the floor, and
yeah,
there's blood everywhere, and we see Matt kind of looking up in the
yeah.
house with
And
that
he
special
has that
knife.
black
Stubble?
stuff in his face as well.
Yeah, and he sees something.
Yeah,
He
or
sees,
at least he's aware of something. I don't know if he says he sees it, but he's aware of something at least.
does do Rand and the Gleeman see it?
They see it eventually, and
And
it's
it's
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh, ladies first.
Well, I was gonna say you could go ahead and say that. They find him in the home, and Matt has that knife that he found in the city,
Yeah,
and they encounter the Fade. This is what the Gleeman calls it, correct?
yeah. And
And
it has the fate. I wrote up the names here because I don't have them all in my head. But I
no, I
could
have the
give you
same
the
thing.
different names for fade. They have different names in different cultures. So the basic name is Midral, and then it's the fade, and then the eyeless, Shadowman, Halfman, Lurks, Fetches, and Neverborn. So they have different names in different cultures. I don't
Just
know.
like
We'll
we
get
do.
there. What you said?
Just like we do.
Like we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Fade jumps down and attacks them. First, Tom throws the knife, and then he jumps down the Fade, and the boys are running away, and Tom tells them to run away, and he has his fight with the Fade, and we don't know really what happens.
And this is very interesting because I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't close the door and start fighting this creature. I would be
Yeah,
running with the boys. So, the Gleeman is kind of an extraordinary person, and he had made a comment about there's nothing more dangerous than a man who knows history or something of that
yeah, something like that.
nature. I kind of feel like the Gleeman is pretty extraordinary. We
Yeah,
know that he knows about the One Power, and he's had experience with the Aes Sedai, and now he's had experience with the Fade. Who is this man?
yeah, yeah. And he's having a. I don't think you get this information in the first book because you've only read the first book. So,
Mhm.
but he mentions Owen, his nephew, and he has had. That's more or less the reason that he helps them because he couldn't help his nephew, but maybe he can help these boys and make amends for what he failed to do earlier. So that's part of his motivation for helping them, at least.
Yes, and just between you and I don't think he should feel responsible for what happened with his nephew because there is no, and it's not that I'm not going to say that I'm a fatalist here, but or have any direction of how things should work out, but um, any young man who seems to exhibit the power has difficulties.
Yeah,
And this is, or even some of the young women, for all I know. So, what is my point? My point is that, he wasn't an ordinary young man.
no,
And, it's not like he could have just said, okay, you can become a farmer or you can become a gleeman or you can, like travel the world or whatever it is. Once you start to exhibit or have a sense of this exhibition of these abilities, your life doesn't go down a normal path. And so, I think the gleeman needs to give himself a little bit more credit,
yeah,
for, it may not have been a problem that he could solve. So, so it's very interesting. And I think the gleeman is telling Rand, that, you need to protect your friend, and do everything you can. And that's exactly what seems to have been happening. And so they kind of run off. And boy, I would give, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that house to see what's going on between the Gleeman and the Fade, wouldn't you?
yeah. Do you think what do you think happened?
Well,
Do you think
excuse me.
do you think the Gleeman survived or do you think he died? Or do you think the Fade survived?
I
What do you
think
think
he was
happened?
able to fight off the Fade, but at a great cost. Now, I don't know whether or not he sacrificed himself. I think the Gleeman knows how to do things that, Rand and Matt don't understand.
Yeah,
And neither do we at this point in the story. And maybe
yeah.
that's why they didn't show it to us. But,
We just we just have to watch and find out.
we have to watch and find out because, even the scene where the Gleeman attacks the barmaid,
Yeah,
how did he know that that was going to happen? And, you have to ask yourself these questions um, as to
yeah,
why he was able to even fight her.
yeah,
She was very experienced, and she not only, even though she couldn't trap um, Matt and Rand in that room, she was chasing after them, and she would have killed them.
yeah,
They wouldn't have been able to fight her off. So the Gleeman had to sort of take a surprise angle to her, which he did, and he had to make sure she wasn't going to be able to respond. And
yeah,
that's what he did, in a very violent nature. And so I think that he has fought the Fade before, and
yeah,
perhaps he saw a similar pattern happening with his nephew and knew what to do up to that point. But maybe he's had some time to think about what the right move, the next move would be, since he himself admitted that if you have that information, it makes you more dangerous. If you
yeah,
have that knowledge, and the Gleeman has maybe all the more knowledge than anybody else in this story.
yeah. And then we have the finale to the episode, which
Ah,
15 or 20 minutes long
ah,
action sequence with a. I don't know how much into detail we should go with this, but it was. I think it was a wonderful way to finish off the episode.
it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's been building up to this,
Yeah,
what's going to happen with Logain. And to be honest with you, it's a precarious situation for the Aes Sedai. We've been talking about how they're exhausted, and Leandrin is pretty much an opportunist, isn't she? No one's looking. She's going to go ahead and go for an opportunity to gentle. a man with the one power, and she's been trying to be diplomatic about it. And she approaches Kareen and says, if he escapes, we can say that um, we had to use the power. And
Yeah.
I almost wonder to myself, I questioned for a second, and I still even question this for a second about the idea of Leandrin suggesting to Corinne that if Logain was freed, they'd have to use the one power. And I thought, is Leandrin under Logain's influence to release so he could be released? Because he seems incredibly confident and
Yeah.
not scared like the other guy we saw in the beginning. You remember the other false dragon
Yeah.
who
And
looked
the question,
terrified.
yeah, and the question is, does Logain really try to break the shield, or does he just probe it and see how strong they are, and he's just waiting for his army to arrive before he acts? We don't know if he's been trying really hard all the time, or if he's just been playing with them a little bit, until his forces arrive. We don't know
And
that.
he's fine with them getting all tired and exhausted using all their
Yeah,
powers, and he figures this is perfect, like, they're gonna get tired, and then, my army's gonna come, and they're not gonna have a lot of strength, and then I can just kind of, well, this is, something that actually does happen. And at the same time, um, you had mentioned that Nynaeve bonds more with, Moiraine's warder, and that really important message she heard from her family about her parents,
yeah,
and he's able to tell her what it means. And I think now she's even looking at it like, gee, these warders not only are very useful for protection and
yeah,
for other things, but now he's making my stay here even more and giving me more meaning to what the last thing my parents ever said to me. This is going into sort of like one of those very, unique situations where you meet someone and it means a lot to you.
yeah.
And
And you
now
see a blush at times, and so on. And they're really starting an emotional bond of some kind.
they are, and it's very interesting. And unfortunately, right as they are going to, let's say, go to take it to another level, whatever that level would be, they're attacked by Logain's army, as you said, and this is when we get to see Logain use more of his full powers, isn't it?
Yeah, and we see him break free, and he throws the two eyes at eye across the room, and then we see him in a few seconds later. We see him melting his cage, which is a very nice image to see them just melting away, and the black flecks of and the soot from the cage just flying up in the air. And it's a very, you see that, now I'm free, now I can wreck shop or something like that.
And I think we saw this in the trailer, didn't we,
Yeah,
Stubble?
yeah, and I mentioned it in the trailer that he was melting his cage there, and yeah, it looked,
And you were right. You were
yeah,
absolutely right. And what also is very interesting about this is, uh, it's at this very moment, and I want to talk about the fighting scenes in the forest as well in a second, but it's at this very moment that Moraine happens to be there and confronts Logain, and she's not afraid of him. It's very strange,
yeah,
you know, and then and I don't know if this was really true with what she says about his power being a trickle.
no,
And I don't really know. Like, we don't really know. Logain says that he said something about being able to feel the surgence of power in a certain way. And it seems very clear that I don't think Logain even cares about this conversation. I
no,
think that he still needs to get out of there. He's in this
yeah,
cave and there's Sedai in the way.
yeah,
And so while it seems like what Lorraine may have said upset him, I don't think he even cares. He just has to play the game so he can get out of this cave.
yeah.
And, you know,
I,
Logain,
I think Moraine tried to stall him so Corinne and Leandrin could regain some of their composure, I think some of it was just, you know, getting information, but I think some of it was just to stall to have her sisters ready.
I agree 100%. And, that's when we see Logain respond back with violence,
Yeah,
using the one power. And it seems like Corinne sacrifices herself to save Maureen and Leandrin.
yeah,
And one thing that I can say is that we so this whole thing goes down at the same time while they're getting invaded by the king's army.
yeah,
And it seems like we also get to see the Aes Sedai do battle, not just in the cave, but also outside in this forest. And it's daytime and it's foggy, and they're fighting. It's confusing, and Nynaeve is just like, "Oh my god!" Like that's what you would be doing if it were me and you. We would be like, "Oh my god." Um, I don't know what to do, and she's
no,
kind of like backed up against a tree, just terrified about what's going to happen. And you can see the Aes Sedai they are so prepared for this. Even, like I'm sure some of them fell. We saw warders in there. They are just fighting and using whatever power they can to fight this thing off. And I really like that scene. It felt like you were playing Dungeons and Dragons.
yeah, and I like the practical effects that they use. So it's not
Yes.
just flashes and lasers and you know
No.
no, they really used practical effects and then enhanced it with some computer effects as well, of course. But
It was
uh,
wonderful. It was
yeah,
wonderful. Everybody was taking strikes, everybody was getting blows. It
yeah,
was a real battle scene, and in that forest, like, and there were all the leaves had fallen, and it was like foggy, and it just really, like, you could hear if they had battle music in the background, you could just hear the battle music and the
mm,
swords clinking and the armor chinking and people being pushed around and the Aes Sedai using their one power, and just like the whole thing was just, it was really extraordinary. And I think Nynaeve was just amazed. Maybe she has never seen a battle like this one before.
no. And you saw also the some of the Red Aja, they don't have any warders to protect them, so they were
Yeah.
hit with arrows and went down a lot faster than the Green who had protection. Yeah,
Yeah, it's true. And we saw like one of the green Aes Sedai turn the arrows around and,
yeah,
change its direction, which was very satisfying, oddly satisfying to see, uh, the people have their own weapons used against them. Um, and so,
but but you
when,
have you have also the when Karenni, I don't know
yes,
exactly the
yes.
pronunciation. When
Mhm.
she died, you saw how that affected her water.
Yes, he was devastated, and he just was, he reacted by, trying to attack, Logain, who was now once again encased in, suppression of his one power. And
Yeah,
when he took his 2 axes and penetrated the shield, um, it looked like Logain responded by, blasting, making an explosion that broke
yeah,
all the pieces of the axes into projectiles
yeah.
that killed
Uh,
practically everybody in the room.
For reference, I will say that they have changed some of these things, the powers for the TV series a little bit, but for me it worked very well, I think. And
And tell
and
us the next part after that explosion, Stubble. What happens? Everybody's on the floor dying. They're
yeah,
bleeding to death. It's horrible.
yeah, and you see Nynaeve coming into the cave or whatever it is, and everyone is on the ground, and everyone is bleeding out or very injured from the piece of the axe metal that has shattered and flown towards them. And Nynaeve, she has developed this bond with the land order, and she sees him bleeding out with a huge cut across his throat. And so she echoes, and we are devastated as well because he's one of our favorite characters. We don't want him, to die. So she echoes our own when she says no and no, and then at the third no, we see that she releases her power, and it's very much stronger than the other Aes Sedai had. She's like everyone almost shies away from her. You know, everything almost explodes around her, and she heals not only Lan but all the others as well.
And they said it was like this, the sun ignited, like a
Yeah,
sun ignited. The entire room was filled with this super intense, bright white light that
yeah,
encased everything in the room. And it was just overwhelming. And it was kind of like you would have to go like this to hide back from it. And it was just like, like you could just feel the intensity of her
yeah,
power. And her power healed everyone's wounds, including the warder who had his neck practically sliced open. That
yeah,
was healed. And it was incredible, Stubble. It
yeah.
was incredible.
And I think one of the best things with the whole last 15 minutes, the whole battle at the end, we know what everyone's motivations were. They were never just, action for action's sake. We knew what everyone wanted. We knew what everyone's goal was. And then at the end, Nynaeve healing primarily Lan, you know exactly what she was feeling. She was, it was desperation, it was anger, it was frustration, and it was, no, not when she finally finds someone who she really clicks with. She can't lose him this way. And so and it's raw power. It's not directed. It's not like finely woven threads, like very delicate. It's raw power. And yeah, and the sound was very effective. You felt the whole thing. It was a very, very nice end to, and it doesn't end there. What
No, it
happens
doesn't,
next?
but I'm still riding the high of that moment, Stubble, because I felt that wave, didn't you? I felt that. That
Yeah,
was like, you just were like, "Oh my god," and you just knew it was something special.
yeah,
When this happened, you could feel the intensity, of what Nynaeve had done, probably unintentionally, because
yeah,
like you said, it was raw power. And she maybe, what I think is interesting about this is that maybe she needed to make a connection, and maybe all the Aes Sedai need to make a connection with someone. And I know you said there's
yeah,
some that shun the relationship, but maybe there are some Aes Sedai who need to make a connection with someone and have that strong connection in order to reach a certain level of
yeah,
abilities.
yeah.
And we could
And
see that. We could see,
what
like, just what you said.
Yeah. Do you think she will be able to channel now afterwards, or do you think this was a one-time thing, or what do you think happens?
I think she can channel, but she needs to have training. She can't sort of like be wandering the countryside and, kind of finding herself in these compromising situations. If she needs to go to the tower and get training, or shadow another Aes Sedai or something, she can do it. But I don't see her leaving them, going back to her village or something like that. I just don't see her doing that. I think she needs to have some kind of mentor or someone, or make a bond with someone who is going to show her what her abilities are.
Yeah. Well, you just have to watch and find out.
And that comment about, and you saw the light ignite, that was made by Logain.
Yeah. And
He seemed,
I'm not sure. I think in her raw power moment, I think it almost ignited the air or something, and because there's what you call it, controversy, because men aren't supposed to see female weaves, and the women aren't supposed to see male weaves. But I think she more or less ignited the air, and you know the wind was blowing and everything, so he saw the effect of it anyway, I think.
yeah, I think everybody who was in that vicinity saw it. And
Yeah,
the Aes Sedai are, I'm not going to say they're shocked, they're stunned
yeah,
by what they saw.
yeah,
And I should note that she was not able to bring Corinne back from the dead.
no. And
But
that's something that from the books, that you can't heal death. You can heal the most grievous wound, but you can't heal death.
Yes. But we did see something that was maybe the most incredible thing we've ever seen. And now and we talked about this before about Leandrin possibly looking for the right opportunity
Yeah,
to do the gentling charm.
yeah,
And, you know, at this point, after the death of Corinne and what they've witnessed,
yeah.
was this the right moment to do the gentling charm? Was it?
Well, you know, they do a different story a little bit from the book, so this doesn't happen in the books. But what were the alternatives, you may ask? Because they were already exhausted, they were already downbeaten by everything that's happened, and so would they be able to keep in prison all the way to Tarvalon, with several days journey, maybe
Right,
weeks?
right.
So so now they have broken tower law, possibly. So maybe there will be consequences. Who knows?
Yes, and we know that, and I agree with you. I feel that this was they were given no choice now. They had to do this.
Yeah,
And not only will there be repercussions from the tower, but that armies may still come after them. I don't really know, but the king may not be happy about it because the king may feel that he's lost this opportunity, as I said before, to have that connection, that closer connection to the one power, which
yeah.
he himself doesn't possess. But having
But,
someone close to you, you know, who has it, gives them a sense
yeah.
of that, a deeper meaning to it.
But I think I saw that wasn't he down and killed on the battlefield? I think the
Perhaps he
king.
was.
Yeah,
I missed that. I know that there was fighting in the woods, and
yeah,
that was that part before where Nynaeve was out there watching
yeah.
this whole thing happen. But um, you know, does
But
this mean that this is the end of the war? I don't know, because there may be other men saying that they are the dragon again. So, you know, I'm not quite sure whether that's going to end that thing. Maybe it does,
yeah.
but it was such an incredible moment. And of course, as we are talking about it, they do gentle Logain, um,
What do you
and
think? What did you think of that image that when the black stuff was ripped out of him and he started crying while he was in the air, and uh, it
I
was
think it was
very emotional for him.
I think it was physically and emotionally painful, you know, kind of like having your soul ripped out of you, because this is what
Yeah,
he has become. He's no longer an ordinary non-power user. That's his identity.
yeah,
And now to take that away from him, you know, you can't go back to that anymore. You can't, you know, it's you're I don't think in that particular world that your powers can just fade away and you're fine. I
no,
think that what happens is that it changes something chemically about you.
yeah. Well,
And
we just have to watch and find out, won't we?
we
Uh,
will.
yeah, and you got to see the Aes Sedai linking. We haven't
Yes,
seen that before.
we haven't seen that before. And they were like, "Link with me," and I'm like, "What are they talking about?" And it seems like it intensifies the power
Yeah,
if they're doing a spell that demands more power, and they would need to do this to Logain because he clearly was very, very powerful.
yeah, and yeah, I think this. Yeah, exactly.
My final question to you was Nynaeve drawn to the Aes Sedai more than just tracking them? I mean,
Mm, maybe, maybe not. Maybe some. Maybe a part of her. Maybe some. Not unconscious. What do you call it? Not conscious part of her was maybe drawn to them. Who knows?
a
Sh sh Yeah,
subconscious part of
subconscious.
her.
Her motivation was originally to find the young, the 20-year-olds who were taken away from the village by this horrible Aes Sedai and her order. That was her original motivation. But maybe her motivation has changed now. Who knows?
I think that we're gonna see this episode was so incredibly exciting. This video, which is almost an hour and 40 minutes long, is a test to that
Yeah,
excitement from this particular episode. Did you have anything else you would like to say about the episode, Stubble? Before
Only
we
that it's my favorite episode so far by a long shot. The
Mhm.
first three had I had issues with different things in the first was the one I had the most issues with, and they got better for every episode. And this episode, I couldn't find anything to really. I thought it was wonderful. The exposition was great, and it was not. You didn't feel like exposition, but you learned so much world building when it came to the Aes Sedai and the Warders, and even the traveling people as well. You got a lot of information. And I'm just wondering what will they focus on in the next episode? Because in this episode they focused on the Aes Sedai with Nynaeve, Lan, Moraine, and the others. And I wonder what the next episode will focus on.
Yeah, this is a good question, and I have to say I just loved this episode. This had everything in it, and they worked very hard to give us in 1 hour, which seemed like a 2-hour movie.
Yeah,
It really had so many important elements to it, and a lot of joyful and painful and interesting and scenes in it that just covered so much.
yeah.
Stubble, we're very lucky to have gotten something like this, and I'm just trying to think of if they said what the next episodes. No, we
The
don't know the
title,
title. No,
yes, we know
but
that.
when is the next
I
episode
know the
coming out?
title. I know
Oh,
the title.
what is it?
Blood calls blood.
Okay. Okay. So this one was called, this episode was called, what is it? The Dragon
Reborn.
Reborn.
Yeah.
So I have to say, Stubble, I'm so looking forward to the next episode. When is the next episode coming out?
It's for you. It's in the evening on the Thursday. For me, it's 1 o'clock past midnight.
Okay. Well, I'm going to rewatch the episode and see if I can see the name of the doll.
Yeah,
And
and yeah,
yes,
I thought it was a wonderful episode.
it really was. And
Yeah,
this is
and
what we
and
were
the
all hoping
characters.
for.
Yeah, and the characters didn't feel. At least I said I didn't feel like characters. They felt like real people. They didn't feel like, you know, your plot device character. They felt real.
So did the Warders.
Yeah,
It felt very real, and I want to see what the dynamic is when we finally do reach, if we do reach, when we finally do reach that White Tower, whether
yeah,
that changes when they're on the road
yeah,
versus when they're in the tower. So I really do want to see all of those things,
yeah,
and I also want to find out what happens to Nynaeve from this point forward, as she had that startled look on her face.
yeah. And I think in the next episode we will probably see the White Cloaks again.
Yes, because you know that this event is going to grab a lot of attention,
Yeah,
knowing that they're all camped out there, and they're not going to be able to deny that they are Sedai, are they?
no, and yeah, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll talk again in a week or so.
We certainly will, and thank you for joining me
Yeah,
to go over episode 4 of the Wheel of Time television series, The Dragon Reborn. It's been such a pleasure, as always, Stubble, talking
yeah,
to you about the Wheel of Time. And for those of you who are watching, thanks for watching this episode and the series where we're reviewing the Wheel of Time television series. This was episode 4 spoiler review. And join us for the next one, which will be coming out over the next week. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a very long video, but trust me, it's worth it because there were so many great things in this episode. And remember, to all of you out there, please be kind.